How do you avoid becoming a statistic?
From previous research and our more than 10 years of experience in using the 3 waves of change approach, the most common contributing causes of senior executive transition derailment are: 1. Failure to align with the new boss's implicit and explicit expectations. Some of those expectations are unspoken and need to be revealed. 2. The new incumbent's momentum clashes with the presenting situation and the expectations of key stakeholders. This can include a clash with the predominant leadership culture.
Momentum is the transitioning executive's strong predisposition to behave in specific ways. If allowed, unfettered and unguided, the executive would enter the new situation with a preferred set of lenses and frameworks through which to view and interpret his or her new situation. He or she may bring some preconceived notions, assumptions, or expectations. And particularly when under stress, the new executive is likely to regress to the strengths and familiar approaches, styles, roles, and behaviors that made him or her successful in the past. The transitioning executive's momentum may or may not fit the presenting situation they have entered.
3. The new incumbent does not conduct a rigorous ongoing situation analysis of the larger situation they have now entered.
The largest components of the presenting situation include the momentum and expectations of key stakeholders, both internal and external, the composition and capabilities of the transitioning executive's extended team. In other words, what does the team's talent inventory look like, and how well does the team perform as a team? What are the different cultures in the different parts of the organization that influence behavior and performance? And which organizational capabilities are strong and which are not strong enough?
4. As part of that situation analysis, the new incumbent needs to conduct a disciplined stakeholder analysis. This includes key internal and external stakeholders and identifying the people who, in turn, influence them. The discovery of the Wave 1 oops.
The new incumbent often expects that he will have accurately identified the levers for change by the end of his first 4 to 6 months, that he will be achieving significant traction in making those changes, and that he will have essentially taken charge. Instead, what the research and our experience shows is that by the end of the 4 to 6 month mark, the executive and her team will have made some progress, have found that some of the changes they expected to be hard are in fact easy, some of the changes they expected to be easy are hard. As they solve obvious problems, the solutions reveal other underlying problems, and the resistance to change is stronger, more pervasive, and involves more people than they first imagined. Within the 3 waves of change model, we call this unexpected discovery the Wave 1 oops, and we will turn to the 3 waves of change model in a moment.
Six. Another significant contributor to derailment is the transitioning executive's reluctance to evaluate his individual team members or inaccuracy in populating the team with the right mix of competencies. Accurately selecting the continuing members of the team can often take 4 to 5 quarters. 7. The other major derailer to not achieving the intended outcomes over time is the transitioning executive's inability to measure and change the predominant culture in different parts of her organization.
The evidence to support this is also drawn from the 2015 McKinsey report on surveying almost 1,200 C-suite executives, who found measuring and changing culture to be among the most difficult transition challenges.
There are 2 more potential causes of derailment that will become more apparent after we quickly review the model of the 3-wave phenomena. Those 2 causes are:
8. Failure to effectively engage with additional stakeholders in a deeper dive immersion phase of diagnostics to tease out the otherwise hidden sources of barriers to change. And 9. The inability to manage large-scale change once the priority organizational problems are identified. Let's take a quick look at the research-based model of the three-wave phenomena. In 1987, John Gabaro of Harvard University reported the results of his multi-year, in-depth longitudinal case studies and retrospective studies of a total of 17 senior executives in transition. His findings indicated that taking charge for senior general and functional managers could take from 2 to 2.5 years or longer. It is only after that amount of time that the results of all of the changes they have made are sustainable and consistent. Gabaro's second major finding was that the typical senior executive transition process was not a steadily increasing process of learning or action, but a series of stages that alternate between learning and action that is sequentially predictable, resulting in the three-wave phenomena. Wave 1 is a period of entry and adjustment, where the executive and his team are assessing the current performance of the business based largely on their collective past experiences. They begin to make changes in processes, personnel, and solve apparent problems, assuming they will have diagnosed the underlying root causes that inhibit more effective performance by the end of the first 4 to 6 months of the transition. Instead, what the transitioning executives typically discover at the end of Wave 1 are some successes, some sets of partial solutions or improvements, and unresolved challenges. The transitioning executives are often perplexed by the discovery that some of the changes they had anticipated that would be difficult are in fact relatively easy, some of the easy changes are difficult, and the resistance to change in the organization is stronger, more pervasive, and involves more people than they first imagined.
By making some significant changes in Wave 1, they also discover other underlying problems that they had not anticipated or detected before.
The executive cannot solve the business's challenges alone, and soon she or he learns that their team also does not have all of the answers. In the humorous tradition of comedian George Carlin, I like to call this epiphany the Wave 1 Oops. The current mental models of the transitioning executive and his or her team only carry their change efforts so far. Some of the root causes for the continuing resistance to change remain ill-defined and elusive. Being adaptive learners, the more successful executives leave the Wave 1 stage and enter the Immersion stage, employing different approaches to organizational diagnosis. In the Immersion stage, the executive reaches out to other senior sponsors and key stakeholders outside of his or her tribe to participate in the organizational diagnosis process, identify root causes, and own the results. This is essentially a deep dive into the business, which is no longer primarily based largely on the executive's or his or her extended team's past experiences and mental models. In fact, they often discover that they need to reframe how they were defining the problems. The transitioning executive is focused more on enabling the key stakeholders in the existing business to take a fresh look at the larger organization's processes, practices, and its ability to change. The Immersion stage of transition is a test of the transitioning executive's and his or her team's ability to influence, engage, and collaborate horizontally and vertically with stakeholders outside of his or her direct legitimate authority structure. In many larger businesses, this means influencing within a matrix organization and across national and regional boundaries. The Immersion stage is also a testing ground for the executive's own team members to demonstrate their ability to take a fresh look at their assumptions about the business, demonstrate diplomacy while pushing political boundaries, and leading what may be viewed by others as potentially threatening and disruptive change. Following the Immersion stage, Wave 2 is the design, alignment, and implementation of the next set of significant changes. And as Gabarro found, it is often the largest number of changes of significant magnitude. By the beginning of Wave 2, the transitioning executive will have tested his team to determine who qualify as the key players to see the remaining changes through to completion. Recall from the McKinsey survey that in 75% of the cases, only half of the original team survived the executive's transition, and the majority of the survey respondents had finalized their team only by the end of the first year. Gabarro's third major finding was that the largest number of changes occurred in Wave 1 and Wave 2, most of them after the first 100 days. Wave 2 can last 3 to 6 months and is followed by Wave 3. Wave 3 is a period of changes of smaller magnitude, usually of a continued incremental refinement and institutionalization of the changes implemented in Waves 1 and 2. If this is the definition of having taken charge, it can take 2 to 3 years or more to complete.
Using the three-wave phenomena as a backdrop, we have found a number of measurements, tools, and facilitated learning approaches can enable a more successful transition for the entire executive team. Because each senior executive transition has its nuances, we will highlight a few of these approaches here. But keep in mind, this is not a one-size-fits-all approach.
One, momentum assessment of the transitioning executive. Helping the executive and the coach increase awareness of the potential momentum misfit issues and personal demons that could possibly derail him. 2. Coaching on alignment with the boss's spoken and often unspoken expectations, like why you were selected over others, and what that means in terms of expectations, and what characteristics they expect to see you display in your new job. 3. Facilitation of the use of 3 waves of change toolbox tools, such as key stakeholder analysis and management tools. 4. Behind-the-scenes assessment of the capabilities of the individuals on the transitioning executive's extended team. 5. Assessment and facilitation of the team's current capabilities for tactical and strategic management. 6. In response to the Wave 1 oops, management of the reset of expectations and involved stakeholders and entry into the immersion stage of transition. 7. Selected use of diagnostics in immersion, including organizational network analyses and cultural surveys and targeted organizational effectiveness assessments. 8. Frameworks to guide the alignment and implementation of organizational change plans. 9. The independent collection and synthesis of 360-degree feedback to evaluate the progress of your transition efforts. This is particularly important during Wave 1, but it can also be useful with an extended group of key stakeholders during the deep dive diagnostic immersion phase and the Wave 2 change plan development and implementation phase. #10. The design and facilitation of large group interventions to accelerate the alignment and adoption of change deep in the organization and across organizational boundaries to augment the typically slower cascading communications or pilot project approaches.
We hope you obtained some new insights into senior executive transitions from this introductory video. For more information, please feel free to contact me, Dr. Gary Myszkowski.